Reverend Christine Coleman calls for an investigation into Kagame regarding the poisoning of Rwandans abroad. If you think that fleeing an oppressive regime keeps you safe, think again. Exiled Rwandan families are dying under terrifying circumstances, and no one is talking about it. Imagine you have left everything behind: your home, your country, your life, to a ruthless dictator. You arrive in Europe, the United States, or Canada thinking you can finally breathe freely. But one day, a relative, a young professional, a brilliant student complains of stomach pain. A few days later, their organs fail and they are dead. Coincidence? Not according to dozens of Rwandan families who point the finger at Paul Kagame's regime. Today, I take you on a chilling investigation into what some call a transnational poisoning campaign. What are the signs? Who is behind this, and why does the world remain silent? Stay with me, because what you are about to discover might just make you rethink everything you thought you knew about the safety of exiles. It all starts with a troubling message posted on social media by Reverend Christine Coleman. On X and Facebook, she raises an alarm. Rwandans living abroad are losing their loved ones under suspicious circumstances. She talks about families who fled Rwanda to escape what she calls the evil Kagame. These families, settled far from their homeland, believed they had found peace. But according to Coleman, they are now struck by a wave of mysterious deaths. And not just any deaths. Young people, students, professionals, promising individuals, often connected to parents critical of the Rwandan government. The modus operandi always the same: a sharp stomach pain, followed by rapid organ failure. In 3 or 4 days, the victim is gone. No obvious traces, no clear explanation, just a heavy silence. Take the example of Anne Rwigara, a young woman mentioned by Coleman. Anne came from a family known for its opposition to Kagame's regime. Her sister, Diane Rwigara, had dared to challenge the president during an election in 2017. The result? Harassment, arrest, and constant pressure on the family. Anne, on the other hand, lived abroad, far from all that. At least, that's what she thought. Until the day she started complaining of abdominal pain. A few days later, she was dead. Officially, a natural cause. But for her family, it's something else. A targeted assassination, orchestrated from Kigali. And Anne is not an isolated case. Coleman claims that dozens of families report similar stories. Students at university, young people at the start of their careers, all brutally cut down, all linked to dissenting voices. So, why should we care? Because if these allegations are true, they reveal a much larger threat than we imagine. We are not just talking about local score settling. We are talking about a regime that, according to these families, extends its claws across continents to silence those who dare to criticize it. This is a serious accusation, and it raises a burning question. How can a government track and eliminate its opponents thousands of kilometers away under the noses of Western democracies? To understand, we must dive into the details, the symptoms, the methods, and especially the testimonies of those who live in fear. Let's start with the symptoms, because that's where everything becomes really strange. According to Coleman, every victim follows the same pattern. It all begins with a stomach ache. Nothing alarming at first, just enough to think of indigestion. But within a few hours it worsens. The pain becomes unbearable, and soon the organs start to fail. The liver, the kidneys, the heart, everything collapses like a row of dominoes. In 3 or 4 days, it's over. No prolonged fever, no obvious external signs, like rashes or bleeding. Just a quick and discreet death. Does it remind you of something? Perhaps the Russian poisoning cases. Think of Navalny or the exiles targeted by the Kremlin. But here, we're talking about Rwanda, a small country in Central Africa, more often associated with its genocidal past than with covert operations abroad. These symptoms are not trivial. They suggest sophisticated poisons, substances that attack the internal system without leaving obvious traces. Toxicology experts would say it resembles agents like thallium or certain neurotoxins. Odorless, tasteless, and almost undetectable without specialized testing. But here's the catch. In most cases reported by Coleman, no thorough autopsy is conducted. Why? Because the deaths often appear natural. A young, healthy person suddenly collapsing is shocking. But it doesn't always trigger a criminal investigation, especially not in countries where local authorities have no reason to suspect a link to a foreign government. And yet the families have no doubt. They describe a pattern. The victims are not chosen at random. They are sons, daughters, brothers of those who have publicly criticized Kagame or his party, the Rwandan Patriotic Front. Take Diane Rwigara, for example. After her aborted candidacy, in 2017, she was imprisoned, then released under international pressure. But the message was clear: challenging Kagame comes at a price. And this price, according to some, extends well beyond Rwandan borders. Exiles who continue to speak out, whether in protests, on social media, or in interviews, become targets. And if they themselves are out of reach, their relatives, more vulnerable, pay the price in their stead. But how would that work? Specifically, Coleman Dinsun has a theory, and it is terrifying. She points to what she calls death squads, Rwandan agents operating abroad. These agents, she says, rely on a well-organized network. Rwandan embassies, diaspora communities loyal to the regime, and even intermediaries recruited with money. She makes a clear distinction between true refugees, those who have fled for good, cutting all ties with Rwanda, and those she accuses of being imposters. The latter, according to her, regularly travel to Rwanda, financially contribute to the government, and frequent the embassies. They would be the accomplices who identify targets and facilitate attacks. Imagine the scene. A Rwandan student at a European university, say, in Paris or London. He lives his life, attends classes, goes out with friends. But one day, he meets a compatriot at an event organized by the embassy. An innocuous conversation, a shared drink. A few days later, he is sick and soon dead. For Coleman, this is not fiction. She claims that families are ready to testify to tell how their loved ones were approached by members of the Rwandan community abroad before falling ill. Sometimes, they are not even direct agents, just ordinary people, bribed, with large sums to slip something into a drink or a dish. This is where the story takes an even darker turn. Because if Coleman is right, it means that Kagame's regime has perfected a global intimidation strategy. We are no longer just talking about internal repression, imprisonment, disappearance, assassinations in Rwanda itself. We are talking about an international hunt, a desire to crush any dissent, no matter where it is found. And the numbers are staggering. Human Rights Watch, in a 2023 report, documented cases of Rwandan transnational repression, murders, kidnappings, assaults, in countries like South Africa, Belgium, and even Canada. But poisoning is an even more insidious step because it leaves little evidence. So, why doesn't the world react? That's the big question, and it brings us to the heart of the problem. Kagame has built a carefully polished image internationally. After the 1994 genocide, where more than 800,000 people were massacred, he took power and transformed Rwanda into a model of development. Impeccable roads, economic growth, apparent stability. On paper, it's a success story. The Westerners love that. They turn a blind eye to rigged elections, opponents who disappear, NGO reports that raise the alarm. Why spoil a beautiful story with embarrassing accusations? Especially when Rwanda is a strategic ally in an unstable region, and its soldiers participate in peacekeeping missions in Africa. But this facade has a cost, and it's the exiles who pay it. Coleman insists. These families don't just want to mourn their dead. They want investigations. They want the host governments, those of the United States, Canada, Europe, to take this seriously. They have testimonies, names, dates. They say, look at the medical records, perform autopsies, search for poisons. But for now, there is silence. Perhaps because proving transnational poisoning is a logistical nightmare. Perhaps because no one wants to offend Kigali. Or perhaps because these deaths, scattered around the world, do not make enough noise to shake public opinion. Now let's explore both sides of the coin. On one side, Coleman's accusations are explosive, but they do not come out of nowhere. Credible reports, such as those from Human Rights Watch or Freedom House, have already established that Rwanda practices transnational repression. Opponents have been killed. Think of Patrick Kagame strangled in a hotel in South Africa in 2014. Others have been kidnapped or threatened. The idea that Kagame uses agents abroad is not new. And poisoning would not be a first. In the history of authoritarian regimes, Russia did it with polonium Novichok. Why not Rwanda? With something more discreet? But on the other hand, one must be cautious. Without concrete evidence, toxicological analyses, confessions from agents, intercepted documents, all this remains speculative. The Rwandan government, for its part, rejects these accusations outright. Yolanda Makolo, Kagame's spokesperson, has already described such allegations as insulting, praising Rwanda's progress post-genocide. And it is true that sudden deaths can have natural causes. Rare diseases, accidental food poisoning, accusing a regime of poisoning without solid proof risks falling into conspiracy theories. However, when the same pattern repeats itself over and over, with the same victim profiles, it's hard not to ask questions. And if we dig deeper, let's imagine it's true. How would Kagame go about it? Rwandan embassies could serve as a hub, a place where loyalists gather, where orders circulate. Diaspora communities, often under pressure to prove their loyalty, could be infiltrated. A former Rwandan officer in exile, Kayumba Nyamwasa, has already testified that the regime targets families to silence dissidents. And money in countries where corruption exists, paying someone to poison a target, is not that complicated. A bill slipped under the table, a substance poured into a coffee, and it's done. But here is the chilling moment. If Coleman is telling the truth, the real scandal is not just that Kagame kills from a distance. It's that he does it with complete impunity. Let's take a moment to realize. Young people are dying, families are mourning, and yet no government has launched a serious investigation. No Interpol mobilized, no international commissions, nothing. Why? Because Rwanda is small. Because the victims are exiles, not local citizens. Or because the West has invested too much in Kagame's image to question it. That's the climax of this story. A glaring injustice, hidden under a veil of diplomatic silence. So, what do we do with all this? First, we must acknowledge the pain of these families. They are not asking for the moon, just that we listen to their stories, that we examine the facts. Then, we need to ask the real questions. If a regime can track its opponents to the other side of the world, what does that say about our era, about our so-called international order based on human rights? This is not just a Rwandan affair. It's a mirror held up to our democracies, which often prefer to look away rather than confront unsettling truths. In summary, Christine Coleman's allegations are a thunderclap. Exiled families claim that their relatives, young, brilliant, connected to critics of Kagame, are dying from poisoning with symptoms as precise as they are frightening. The Rwandan regime, however, denies everything. But testimonies are accumulating, and NGO reports paint a disturbing picture of repression that knows no borders. A brutal truth remains. Without pressure, without investigation, these deaths will remain in the shadows. And that, perhaps, is the worst crime of all. Letting impunity prevail. If this story shook you, wait to see what Kagame's regime is still hiding. Click on the next video to uncover the depths of a power that stops at nothing.